Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We'll continue on our discussion in chapter 4 of the nature of tantrum behavior and why it takes place and how it takes place. So I have mentioned in the earlier chapter and in this chapter also, there is this idea of blame, guilt and responsibility. All right, so I just give you some idea, all right, that we should look objectively within the framework of responsibility and not play the blame game or the guilty game. A lot of parents, they feel guilty, they cannot fulfill the needs of their children when they are young. For example, they came from a very poor family, and then when they are young, they do not have toys, they do not have many things. So when they start a family, they have this feeling of guilt within them. That just because I don't have it, my children will have it. And you can see that this is actually a compound problem. That the guilty feeling of the parents who are poor, who now become middle class, trying to give their children more than what they have when they were young, in a way, create this problem of tantrum behavior, because you are feeding, oh never mind, he's just a child, you know, and then what you do is that this tantrum behavior grow and grow and grow because of this whole shaping process, which inevitably, because they do not understand, they are ignorant of the laws of learning, they are ignorant of the whole concept of the process of shaping, they become very permissive parents. So permissivity is not equal to being loving. I remember a lot of parents say, oh, I'm loving to my child by being permissive. No, you are disadvantaging that child, because if that child cannot get out of the temper tantrum the whole life, they would not be able to function as a motivated, self-motivated, achieving human being. They would be all the time throwing temper around. And this is where you have a lot of this, what they call, adults who behave like children, because they have not gone through this whole idea of little amount of deprivation. For example, we did a lot of, in the old days, they have repeated many times the marshmallow test, where a child is given some marshmallow in front of them, and they say if you can wait for 2 minutes or 1 minute, you will get double the amount. So the child will look at it at 2 minutes. For those who do not have that self-control, which is something like the almost likely these people are those who are, these children are having temper tantrums problems. They will just grab the marshmallow and eat, and that's it. Do not think about, oh, if I wait for 2 minutes, then I will get double the marshmallow. They will not be able to have that, because it is just they want instant gratification. So you must understand these three concepts of blame, of guilt, and of responsibility. So as responsible parents, it is our duty to give the best to our child, but to give the best to our child is to give a balanced worldview of motivational aspect of life, that sometimes we cannot get what we want, and if we cannot get what we want, then we will either find some ways of getting that through our own hard work, or by not having negative actions, just to create attention, to force the idea through tantrum. So this is where I think parents has to be very careful. And the next point that is in this book, of what we can understand in terms of temper and temper tantrum, the effect of negative reinforcement on response. So we must understand these basic laws of learning, especially the conditioning in terms of negative reinforcement and response. Negative reinforcement increase the rate of a response, which put an end to the all-going aversive stimuli. In this example, it seems like the parents are doing their child a great disservice by giving in to him while he is throwing a tantrum. They are teaching him something that will bring him much harm throughout his life. It is possible that the parents never began giving into tantrums, but the tantrums behavior developed through what we call the shaping process. So this is being shaped without subtly, gradually, without the parents really understanding the underlying principle of the laws of learning, gave in, and that result in a long-term problem of tantrum. The behavior which the parents first reinforced was probably not an actual tantrum behavior, but was a first step towards shaping process which leads to tantrum behavior. The first behavior may not have looked at all like a tantrum. It may be just been a request that was almost unnoticeably more assertive or demanding than the ordinary, calm, reasonable request. So the child asked in a more assertive form, but not a full tantrum yet. That might have led to many hundreds of slightly more and more demanding requests before anything resembling a true tantrum appeared. There may have never been an individual response in this shaping process, which we can call the first true tantrum. Parents may have been kind, well-meaning people, only interested in the well-being of their child. They may never realize that they were teaching their child to throw tantrum. They may not have seen the development of tantrum behavior as being under the influence of any schedule of reinforcement. By the time the tantrum behavior was fully developed, its origin may have likely been completely a mystery to the parents. So they say, why my child is like that? Why he's throwing that? Why? So that why is because of their ignorance, out of their sense of, remember, guilt that they do not have something, they give it to their child more than what they give because they were young, or the blame, the husband blaming the wife, it is your fault, and the wife saying, it's your fault, you give in, and it's always the parents. And in a lot of temper tantrum, they will play on the two parent, the father or the mother. So they will wait, who will give in? So if the mother gives in, then the father says, see, you gave in. And at certain times, it's the father that gave in. So they will cause even conflict, marital conflict between husband and wife because of this severe tantrum behavior in which the child intelligently in the negative reinforcement responds to a way which is actually very subtle and very dangerous. So what is important is, once we know this whole concept of this response to negative reinforcement, we then apply a gentle approach. So that's why I say in our book here, Positive Islamic Psychology, a transcendent model to achieve peace, happiness and success in the 21st century, we have a practical application of shaping excellent character, and we have booklets from our Khalifa Educational Foundation that teaches the children this very basic idea to know the difference of what we call love, to know the difference in what we call responsibility, and to know the difference of the concept of blame and guilt. Because we cannot operate on being guilty, we cannot operate on blaming either the husband or the wife or the child or the grandfather or the grandmother. A lot of time all this affects also the whole bigger family, especially in Asian family. Oh, it is the grandfather that spoiled this child. Sometimes it's true. The grandfather gave in to that child's demand all the time. So when the child goes back to their parent, he or she expects the same kind of treatment of which the grandparent has actually shaped. So the shaping process must be a continuous intergenerational approach. That means the grandfather must realize he cannot spoil the child to the extent of tantrum behavior. Likewise, the parent also must give notice lovingly and kindly to the grandparent. Say, I know you love your grandchild, but do not go to the extent of they growing up without understanding the sense of responsibility. All right? So this is very important, because an insane society get more and more tantrum behavior, and insane society will create more and more young people without sense of responsibility, and an insane society will create more and more people who are violent. And this is happening in a lot of societies. Unfortunately, for example, if you look at the American society, the black society, the whole societal structure has been destroyed. Because why? Unfortunately, again, we are not pointing to any group of people, but this is the reality that we're facing in the black American society. More than 70 to 80% of the child were born by single parent. That means the mother. The father is nowhere to be. Where are this group of fathers, so-called fathers? They know how to father, they know how to have sex, they know how to have children, but they bear no responsibility whatsoever. So they have multiple partners with no sense of responsibility. So they are absentee in the life of the child. Why? Maybe they grew up also in an environment in which they were allowed to become violent through temper tantrum. So these are adult without no sense of responsibility, adult with no sense of guilt, adult with no sense of doing something good, even for their own child. So this is where the whole society is breaking down, the whole structure is breaking down, because then there's no father figure in that child's life. And once there is no father figure in that child's life, you also have other problems. The child would not know how to react in a situation. That's why you have a lot of bullying and violence at schools. So it is sometimes better not to send your children to school, because there are groups or gangs of young people who gang together to prey on young people, to take their pocket money, to taunt them, to bully them, whether physically or emotionally or mentally, and so on. So these are symptoms of society going insane. So we would like a Muslim society going in the same direction? Definitely not. So how are we going to go about with it? That's why we developed this idea of Islamic psychology, how we can create, for example, parenting modules for our children, and even parenting modules for single mothers, of how they are going to develop their child to be responsible, to be wonderful human beings. And inshallah, if we can maintain intact our societal values and our family values of being Muslims, because we have good guidelines revealed unto us through our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of all the beautiful things of what we need to do in our life, regarding our relationship between husband and wife, regarding our relationship to our parents, regarding our relationship to our children. All are clearly laid out in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what we want to bring is a loving, caring, responsible, remember the word responsible society, starting from our children. That's why we started our Khalifa primary school. Inshallah, we will then develop our Khalifa preschool to nurture our children, so that in this 21st century, where the challenges of this permissive, anything can do type of lifestyle, hedonistic lifestyle, does not infect the Muslim Ummah to a great extent. We are being infected. Remember, this is a global world. Whether you like it or not, you cannot shut your door. Every day, your children are being influenced through the mass media, through cartoons, through a relationship with other children and so on, who are then influenced in a very negative way. So we Muslims must be proactive and strive to change the world, to make it more positive, because as one our scholar says, Shaitan is working full time and you cannot be a part-time Muslim. So they are the satanic forces that is pushing us towards this whole idea of hedonistic, free for all, no responsibility type of society will collapse inwardly. This is true. Any society, you look through history, you study history. That's why Al-Quran, Allah tells us, look into the history of how civilization decay. So this 21st century is on a path towards self-imploding, but it starts with the child. So inshallah, if we understand that we can actually shape through positive reinforcement of how to shift from tantrum behavior to a good, well-meaning, responsible child growing into a well-meaning, responsible, loving and caring teenagers, going into marriage, bringing up the whole generation of young children in a tender, loving, caring manner, in a way that is blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the way that is peaceful, full of harmony, full of love, full of joy, full of happiness. Notwithstanding, we face all kind of challenges that we are surely going to face, because this is the dunya, the lowest of this point on our existence on this earth, for us to be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, if I understand this basic framework of the psychology of how positive reinforcement can shape and remove this whole idea of tantrum behavior, you have learned something. Go back to our book, go back to our booklet, and study how you can be an effective parents, bringing up your children to become wonderful human beings, blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be His true and sincere servant, as we strive to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, making the world good for all the good creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah.